Winter is arriving with its quiet magic, and soon the world will glow with Christmas lights. Dear listener, especially the strong and beautiful women who join me here, I invite you to take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and sit with a warm cup of tea. Let this story be your companion tonight. If it touches your heart, don't forget to like and share. Someone you love might need this story too. I can still hear the sound of the applause. Not the applause of celebration, no. Not the applause you hear at a graduation, or a wedding, or a birthday dinner. This was the applause of a woman delighting in violence, a mother clapping for her son as he struck my daughter. That night has lived inside me for exactly 3 years. It clings to me like smoke after a fire, staining everything I do, everything I've become, even now. If I close my eyes, I can feel the cold marble floor beneath my feet and smell the roasted herbs Celia had spent all afternoon preparing. My name is Marisol Grant, and I have spent 31 years as a family justice attorney, specializing in cases most people avert their eyes from: cases of bruised arms, whispered fears, broken ribs, shattered dignity. I've faced men with power, with money, with fathers in government, men who believed themselves untouchable. I've faced their families, 2 wives who defended them, sisters who excused them, mothers who taught them, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment I watched my own daughter collapse under the force of her husband's hand. Nothing prepared me for the sound of Verena Kane's applause. It was a Sunday, March 14th. I remember the date not because of the event that would unfold, but because it was my late husband's birthday. Samuel loved simple celebrations, a windy walk on the beach, a lemon cake, and Celia's laugh echoing through the house. He'd been gone 2 years. Celia insisted I shouldn't spend the night alone. "Mom, come to dinner. I'm making his favorite chowder. You shouldn't be by yourself on a day like this." Her voice, always so warm, had sounded thinner than usual, but I was drowning in the kind of grief that turns everything into a blur, so I agreed. Her home in Greywick Haven, perched on a cliff above the water, had always looked like something out of a coastal magazine: white cedar shingles, soft blue shutters, a wraparound porch, a place that should have been filled with love, a place she bought with half the inheritance. Samuel left her a decision I had encouraged. Against my accountant's stiff warnings. "Marisol," he had said, tapping his pen, "put it in a trust, just in case." Just in case what? I'd snapped. Just in case your daughter marries a man who becomes a monster. I wish I had listened. I arrived at 6:55. The table was set meticulously, linen napkins, flickering candles, a polished silver ladle Celia had found at a vintage shop. The scent of simmering seafood broth filled the house, the kind that used to greet Samuel when he returned from his research trips. But when Celia hugged me, she felt stiff, like her body didn't remember softness. Her hair was shorter, she'd chopped it to her shoulders. Her blouse had long sleeves despite the warm early spring air. And when I pulled back to look at her face, something flinched behind her smile. "Sweetheart, is everything all right?" "I'm fine. Mom, just work stress." I should have pushed harder. I should have seen it. A mother's instincts don't die with grief, they just get buried. Mine were clawing to the surface, trying to warn me. But then he walked in. Luther Kane. Tall, confident, handsome in that performative way men cultivate when they want to be admired. He gave me a perfectly cordial smile, the one that always felt too polished to be real. "You made it, Mrs. Grant. Celia has been looking forward to this." He stepped aside, and she entered. Verena Kane, his mother, a woman carved from ice and pearls, her hair pinned in a flawless chignon, her cashmere shawl draped with the precision of a stylist's mannequin. Her smile had no heat, not even a spark. Marisol. Dear. She purred. What a blessing to have you here. Celia worked hard on this meal. My Luther is lucky to have such a committed partner. Committed partner, not wife. Partner, an employee. A subordinate. We sat. Luther at the head. Verena on his right. Celia beside him. Me across from Verena, a layout I didn't yet understand was strategic. Celia served the chowder, her hand trembling just slightly. That's when the first warning bell screamed inside me. Her trembling wasn't nervousness. It was fear. Dinner dragged through Verena's endless monologue, country club gossip. Her latest gallery acquisitions. The upcoming charity gala. Each time Celia contributed a detail. Verena corrected her. Each time Celia made a movement. Luther watched her with an evaluative glance, as though scoring her performance. Then it happened. Celia reached to pour water into Luther's glass. Her hand shivered. A single drop fell onto the white linen tablecloth. The silence that followed felt alive, a creature tightening its jaws. Luther placed his fork down with slow deliberation. The sound of metal against porcelain slicing the air. He stood, walked around the table, and slapped my daughter. Once, twice, a third time. Celia crumpled onto the floor, her cheek blazing red. My body froze, not in fear, but in a cold, calculating paralysis that lasted exactly 30 seconds. 30 years of legal experience downloaded into those seconds patterns. Charges. Escalation. Strategy. And then I heard it. The applause. Verena clapping. Clapping. That's how she learns to behave, she said, smiling. A careless wife needs correction. I had to teach Damien the same way back then. My blood turned to ice. Slowly. Deliberately. I stood. Luther expected screaming. Hysteria. The emotional outburst he believed women were made of. Instead, I removed my phone from my purse. My fingers did not shake. Not once. I pressed my speed dial. Chief Roland. I said, my voice like cold stone. This is Marisol Grant. I require immediate response at 128 Lighthouse Road. Domestic assault. Perpetrator present. Witnesses present. I am recording now. I placed the phone on the table, hit record, turned to Luther. Repeat what you just did, I said, and what your mother applauded. The blood drained from his face. You can't. I've prosecuted 190 men like you, I said quietly, and every one of them thought exactly that. He stepped toward me. If you touch me, that's 3 additional charges. I warned. Assault on a witness. Intimidation. Obstruction. I knelt beside Celia, who whimpered softly, her cheek swelling. Mom, she whispered. Hush. Sweetheart, let me speak. Sirens wailed in the distance. They'll be here in 17 minutes. I said, they always come faster for me. Verena's smile finally cracked. This is a family matter. You have no right. I have every right. I snapped. Your son is going to prison. And you applauded violence. That makes you an accomplice. The police burst in moments later. Luther was handcuffed. Verena too. As they dragged them away, Luther looked back at me with seething hatred. This isn't over, he hissed. My family has reach. So do I replied. When the officers disappeared into the night, Celia collapsed into my arms and sobbed not from pain, but from years of buried terror finally breaking open. And as I held her, I realized something with bone-deep clarity. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. Because the Kanes had no idea who they were up against. And neither, perhaps, did I. Before I tell you what came after that night, the hearings, the threats, the fractures that split open like old wounds, I need you to understand who my daughter was before Luther Kane. Before fear rewired her heartbeat. before silence became her native language. Because when you see a woman on the floor with a swollen cheek, you forget. You forget she was once a child who ran barefoot across wet grass. A teenager who laughed so loudly you could hear her from the garden. A woman who built a life with her own 2 hands and pure fire in her chest. Celia was born in late August, during a heat wave that made the seagulls pant. Samuel held her with the kind of awe I had only seen in documentaries about men discovering new species. He wasn't just a scientist, he was a man who believed the world was sacred, delicate, worth protecting. He held our daughter like she was a rare coral that could shatter under careless touch. "She's got your eyes," he whispered that first morning, brushing a fingertip across her cheek. "And your stubborn chin? God help us." Our home back then was small, cluttered with research books and half-finished knitting projects. With a crooked porch we always said we'd fix, and never did. But it was full in the way a place becomes when the people inside truly love one another. Sundays were ours, sacred, set in stone. Samuel made chowder all patience and rituals and gentle humor. Celia measured out spices like they were chemical reagents. I chopped potatoes while telling them about my cases, the injustices that kept me awake at night, the women I wanted to free, the systems working tirelessly to keep them trapped. Celia absorbed everything. She grew up believing justice wasn't some abstract concept. It was a fight you stepped into. Willingly. Repeatedly. Even when your knees shook. At 12, she dismantled our radio because she wanted to see how voices traveled. At 15, she published her first local paper article about coastal pollution. At 18, she left Greywick Haven for university. Head held high. She never once apologized for her brilliance. Sometimes I wonder if that was what attracted Luther. She met him 5 years ago at a biotechnology symposium in Boston. She called me right after. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "I think I met someone. He's smart and focused, and he actually listens. You know how rare that is?" Rare. Yes, but not impossible. And yet something in her tone stirred a faint unease in me. Not because she was excited, but because she was too excited. As if she needed my approval to validate her feelings. "He sounds wonderful," I said. Because what else could I say? When do I get to meet him? Soon. Very soon. 3 weeks later. He came for dinner. I remember the first moment he stepped through my door. Everything about him felt intentional. His neatly pressed shirt, the subtle shine on his shoes, the way he carried the bottle of wine as though performing a role designed to impress. He complimented my home, praised my legal work, asked thoughtful questions, held eye contact just long enough to feel respectful, but not long enough to feel invasive. He knew exactly how to charm. Samuel would have seen through him, I think. But Samuel was gone by then. When Celia spoke about her research, her eyes bright. Luther listened, with that curated interest I have since seen in 100 depositions, an interest that doesn't come from genuine curiosity, but from calculation. Each time she paused to breathe, he slid in a remark about his own achievements. Each time she grew animated, he placed a gentle hand on her knee, as if to quiet her excitement before it could overshadow him. I noticed. Of course I noticed. 30 years of experience does that to you. But I told myself not to be paranoid, not to let fear speak louder than reason. After dinner, when they left, I found myself washing the dishes in silence. "What's wrong?" Samuel would have asked. But it was Celia who approached this time, wiping the counters beside me. "You don't like him," she said. Not accusing, observing. "I don't know him yet," I said carefully. "First impressions are just that, first." She hesitated. "Just, please try." And because she asked, because she was newly in love and glowing in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child building sea glass mosaics on the beach, I tried. Over the next months, Luther became a fixture in our lives. He brought Celia rare books, surprised her with impromptu weekend trips, sent lavish bouquets to her lab, called her my brilliant girl in a way that made her eyes soften. And yet he never once let her speak uninterrupted for more than 20 seconds without interjecting. He always insisted on driving. He always ordered for her in restaurants. He always knew what was best. The first time I met Verena, I understood everything. She was a woman who introduced herself with her lineage before her name, her father's legacy, her husband's wealth, her charity board memberships, her place in Greywick Haven society. She spoke in compliments shaped like knives. "My Luther has worked so hard," she told me, touching her pearls. "He deserves a woman who understands loyalty." The emphasis wasn't subtle. Verena controlled every environment she entered through tone, posture, meticulously curated grace. She acted like she was testing Celia, weighing her, deciding whether she was worthy of the Kane legacy. After that lunch, I told Celia, "I don't trust her." Celia laughed it off. "She's just old-fashioned." Old-fashioned. If only it had been that simple. When Luther proposed a year later in a lakeside spectacle of string lights and violins, I hugged her and smiled. But when she wasn't looking, I felt something twisting deep in my stomach. I should have followed that instinct. The first noticeable shift came quietly: Celia, skipping her weekly Sunday visits. Then the missed calls. Then the shorter conversations. Then the slightly flatter voice. "Work is stressful," she said. "Deadlines," she said. "Just tired," she said. But grief muffles intuition. After Samuel died, I lived inside a fog so dense I couldn't see my daughter's gradual dimming. I mistook her exhaustion for mourning, her quietness for adulthood, her isolation for independence. I didn't see the way Luther redirected her life around him, who she spoke to, where she went, what she wore, even how often she visited her own mother. I didn't see Verena's fingerprints tightening around Celia's autonomy like a clasping bracelet. One night, during a rare visit, Celia told me something that should have struck me like a bullet. "Mom," she murmured, stirring her tea absent-mindedly, "do you think it's possible to love someone so much you accidentally hurt them?" The spoon slipped from her hand. Her eyes flickered fear, confusion, guilt tangled together. I didn't understand the question. "Not really." "No," I said. "Love doesn't hurt. Love doesn't have room for harm." She nodded too quickly. "Right. Of course. I don't know why I asked. But now I do." She was asking permission to call violence something else, something bearable. That was the beginning of her descent. That was when the cracks we couldn't see began spidering beneath the surface. If I had known then what I know now, I would have grabbed her hand, locked the door, and never let her return to that house on Lighthouse Road. But hindsight is a cruel, perfect weapon. It only sharpens once the damage is done. I didn't know the full story of the first fracture until months later. When Celia lay in her childhood bed, whispering truths she had carried alone far too long. But now that I understand it, now that I've replayed it in my mind 1,000 times, I can trace the beginning of the unraveling back to their honeymoon, back to a moment so small, so harmless, that any other man would have laughed it off and kissed his wife's forehead. Instead, Luther cracked. When Celia finally told me the story, she spoke like she was peeling her skin back, layer by layer. "It was our last night in Santorini," she whispered. "The sky was this ridiculous shade of violet, you know. The kind that looks edited even when it's not. I wore that white sundress you liked, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt light. Light. That word broke me more than the violence she later described. They sat on a terrace overlooking the sea, drinking cold wine from sweating glasses. They were celebrating surviving the chaos of a wedding, the weight of expectations, the exhaustion of travel. Celia told me she had been laughing, really laughing about something Luther said. Maybe a joke about the tourists taking photos of their food. Then the waiter approached a young man. Warm smile. Kind eyes just to ask if their meal was all right. Celia complimented it. 30 seconds. A polite exchange between strangers. 30 seconds. When he walked away, Celia said, Luther went quiet. Completely quiet. I thought maybe he was tired. But when we got back to the hotel room, Mom, his face. She paused, her throat tightening as if remembering the tension in that room. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. The words he used were simple, but they carved something inside her. You were flirting, he told her. You embarrassed me. You made yourself look cheap. You enjoy the attention of other men. She told him he was imagining things, that she was just being polite. He laughed, one of those cold, patronizing laughs that come from the throat, not the chest. I know more about you than you know about yourself, he said. You don't realize what you're doing. You've always been too friendly. Too friendly. As if kindness was a sin. And then he said something, Celia whispered, that I still hear when I try to sleep. She swallowed hard, her hands twisting in the bedsheet. He said, My mother warned me about women like you. HE2V. Those were the first cracks, small fissures she didn't recognize as danger. She thought it was jealousy, passion, a misunderstanding. This is how women get trapped, not by the first blow, but by the first doubt. She apologized, not because she believed she was wrong, but because she wanted peace, wanted that laughing woman from the terrace to return. The next morning, he bought her roses, held her hand, kissed her forehead, said she was his whole world. This is what abusers do. They stitch the wound they caused with the same hand that ripped it open. When they returned home, the honeymoon photos showed a radiant bride, a wide-open smile, the clearest sea behind her. No one could see the invisible fracture forming beneath her ribs. The next break happened 2 months later. Celia had been promoted at her research institute, head of a critical therapeutic materials project. They held a celebration dinner. Her supervisor congratulated her with a completely appropriate hug, in front of a room full of colleagues, accompanied by applause. And that was enough. When they returned home, Luther didn't yell immediately. No, he waited until she changed into her pajamas, took off her jewelry, washed her face, and was vulnerable. Then he exploded. You humiliated me. You let another man touch you. You enjoyed it. You want attention. You're unfaithful. Celia recounted this through tears that barely fell. They stayed trapped under her eyes like water held behind glass. I tried to explain, she said. It was a hug. A normal work celebration hug. He didn't even touch my waist, just my shoulders. But Luther, he wasn't hearing me. He called her naive. He called her foolish. He called her stupid. He didn't touch her that night. Not physically. But psychological blows leave bruises no makeup can hide. From that night on, she altered herself piece by piece. She stopped wearing bright colors to work. She stopped laughing too loudly. She stopped staying late in the lab out of fear he'd think she was with someone. She stopped ordering anything he didn't approve of at restaurants. She stopped being Celia Grant. She became an edited version of herself, trimmed and polished to fit within his narrow blueprint of obedience. And just when she was starting to adapt to this new, suffocating rhythm, Verena began her work. I will never forget the first afternoon Celia described spending alone with her mother-in-law. It happened after a family lunch where Verena had insisted they come early so she could show Celia her antique china. Luther had left to run errands, and Verena poured them tea in a pristine white sitting room lined with shelves of staged books. She walked around me like she was inspecting a dress mannequin, Celia told me. I felt her eyes calculating my posture, my hair, my clothes. It was like she was mentally tailoring me. Verena's voice, always so soft and controlled, sliced deeper than any scream. A wife must be attentive without appearing desperate, she counseled. A wife must know when to speak and when to hold her tongue. A wife must never challenge her husband in public. A wife must not make her own family more important than her husband's family. She said that last part while staring straight at me. Celia whispered. This was the grooming stage. The preparation. The training. I've seen it before in cases where mothers raise sons to believe affection is control. And wives must absorb their wrath to maintain peace. But hearing it happen to my daughter, I wasn't there to stop it, to protect her, to name it for what it was: indoctrination. Then came the shopping trip, the one Celia never told me about until everything collapsed. Verena took her to one of those boutique stores with mirrors that distort your reflection to flatter the buyer. She handed Celia dresses deliberately, one size too small. See, Verena murmured. You've let yourself go a bit. Luther likes when you take care of yourself. Celia told me she felt ashamed. As if her body, her capable, brilliant, resilient body had somehow failed. That's what control does. It corrupts perception until a woman sees herself through her abuser's eyes. By autumn, Celia wasn't just adapting, she was erasing herself to avoid conflict. And I didn't know. I didn't see. I didn't ask. Because grief is a selfish fog. It made me blind. One night, months before the dinner that changed everything, I called her after a particularly rough day in court. I thought she would cheer me up like she always did. But her voice was flat, thin, almost afraid to take up space. Mom, can we talk another time? Luther gets upset when I'm on the phone late. I told myself she was simply tired. I told myself marriage changes balancing acts. I told myself the lie that everything was fine. But the truth was already tightening around her, strand by strand. Looking back now, with the clarity you only get after your life detonates, I can pinpoint the first real moment I lost my daughter to him. It wasn't the first slap, or the shouting, or the manipulation. It was the moment she stopped calling me Mom with ease. The moment she hesitated, like she needed permission to speak. That hesitation, barely perceptible, was the echo of the fracture that would one day split our family open. I used to believe that evil announces itself, that it arrives wearing sharp teeth or a raised fist or at least a shadow that warns you to back away. But Verena Kane proved to me yet again that true evil arrives dressed in charm, in elegance, in a soft voice that sounds like silk gliding across polished wood. I didn't understand the full extent of her influence over Luther until the night Celia unraveled the truth piece by piece. And even then, I had to fight the instinct to doubt. Not because I didn't believe my daughter, but because Verena had spent years perfecting her performance, an immaculate mask that fooled courts, institutions, neighbors, entire social circles. A mask she had worn around me. 2. Celia told me it began slowly. Verena didn't launch into cruelty. She dripped it carefully, precisely, like poison calibrated in a lab. One evening, several months into the marriage, Celia came home from work to find Verena already inside the house. She'd used the key Luther had given her, a spare, he said, just for emergencies. Except Verena's idea of an emergency was the spice cabinet looks disorganized or your curtains are an inch too long. That night, Celia walked into her kitchen and saw Verena emptying entire drawers onto the counter. "Hi, dear," Verena said without looking up. "Your salt was in the wrong place. And your pots, my goodness, no wonder your roast never tastes quite as balanced as Luther likes." Celia stood there, hands full of mail, unable to find her voice. "Let me help you," she finally said, though she didn't want to say it. "I didn't ask you to." "That's exactly the problem," Verena cut in, rearranging a shelf. "You assume you know what you're doing. Experience, my dear, matters. You're still new at all this. But don't worry, I'll teach you." That was Verena's favorite word. Teach. And Luther encouraged it. He defended it. He praised it. Later that same night, he told Celia, "You should be grateful. Most women would kill for a mother-in-law so invested." Invested. as if Celia were a company Verena intended to acquire. Celia tried to set boundaries, gentle ones, reasonable ones. I appreciate your help, but I'd prefer to organize the kitchen myself. Verena stilled, slowly placed the jar she was holding onto the counter, turned to Celia with a smile so tight it was almost painful. A good wife, she said, doesn't reject the guidance of the woman who raised her husband. Celia apologized, not because she meant it, but because she'd already learned Luther never let her contradict his mother. And this was only the beginning. The worst moments, Celia said, were the afternoons when Verena invited her over, just the two of them, in the grand, stale Kane estate on Davenport Street. The house was enormous, dim, full of antique clocks that ticked at different tempos, as if the walls themselves were remembering the past out of sync. Verena brewed tea in delicate china cups and began her lessons. A wife must maintain composure, she'd say. A wife must not argue with her husband. A wife must anticipate needs before they are spoken. A wife who causes tension is failing her duties. Celia tried to tell her that she and Luther worked as partners, equals. Verena's smile sharpened. Oh, darling, equality is a myth sold to women who don't understand how to keep a home. She leaned closer. Marriage is not a negotiation. It is a hierarchy. You support my son. He leads? Celia looked down at her cup that day and realized her hands were trembling, and Verena saw it. God help me. She loved it. Don't be nervous, Verena murmured, reaching to pat Celia's cheek. I know this is unfamiliar to you, but you'll learn. I learned, too. Celia asked her, timidly. Did Damien, your husband, ever struggle with anger? Verena's eyes glittered just for a second. Damien had moments, she said slowly. But I taught him discipline. A man needs structure, boundaries. A wife who knows how to calm him, to remind him who he is. Calm him. How Celia pressed, though she later told me she instantly regretted it. Verena sat back, her expression softening as though recalling a fond memory. Well, she said lightly, if he drank too much and raised his voice, I simply matched his energy. Sometimes with a vase, once with a candlestick, once with a marble paperweight. He learned quickly. She sipped her tea. I made sure of it. Celia stared at her, horrified. But Verena only smiled. Marriage is a dance, dear. Someone leads, someone must follow, and sometimes someone must correct. Celia didn't know then that Damien Kane's death, ruled an accidental fall down the stairs, had hints of a darker truth buried beneath polished reports and influential connections. She didn't know Verena's gentle tone was layered over a history of violence and manipulation so old it had become second nature. But something in that tea room chilled her. A quiet understanding, like recognizing a predator only after it has already stepped into your shadow. The first physical act of violence from Luther didn't shock Celia when it happened. That broke my heart more than the incident itself. She described it to me with a kind of numb clarity, the clarity of someone who had already rehearsed her excuses. It happened after he made me fire the interior designer, she said softly. Do you remember Sebastian, the one who helped us pick colors? I nodded. He'd been kind, professional, creative. Celia adored working with him. Luther didn't like how often he was at the house, she said. He said Sebastian acted too familiar, that he had intentions. He's gay, I said automatically. Yes, Celia whispered. I showed Luther photos of Sebastian with his fiancée, but it didn't matter. He said bisexual men were the worst liars. He said I was too naive to see it. Jealousy isn't always about desire. Often, it's about territory. Celia kept insisting it was harmless. Sebastian was doing his job. He'd been recommended by a colleague. There was nothing inappropriate about it. But Luther's anger simmered until the pot boiled. Celia and Sebastian stood in the living room, going over fabric swatches. When Luther arrived home early, he didn't greet them, didn't smile, didn't shake hands. He stood perfectly still, like a man evaluating a crime scene. Sebastian, bless him, tried to make conversation. "It's a stunning home," he said. "You both have wonderful taste." And Luther replied, "We don't need your opinion." Celia said. Sebastian went pale, tried to apologize for nothing. "Really?" But Luther cut him off. "My wife won't be needing your services anymore." Then he turned to Celia. "Tell him," he ordered. "Tell him you don't want him in this house." Celia tried to reason, tried to calm him, but she saw something in his eyes, a cold, flat fury she had never seen before. So she did it. She fired Sebastian, apologized, watched him leave with his box of samples. When the door closed, she turned to Luther and said 5 words that detonated the evening. "This is our house too." He pushed her so hard she hit the wall. Her head snapped back. She saw stars. He apologized immediately. He cried. He begged. He blamed stress. He blamed work. He blamed everything except himself. And then he brought her a diamond necklace the next morning. The same tactic Verena later called resetting the emotional rhythm. Control, guilt, reward, repeat. When Celia finished telling me this, she didn't cry. She didn't shake. She simply said, "I thought it was a one-time thing. But I knew something she didn't yet understand. Violence almost never begins with fists. It begins with entitlement, reinforced by a mother who insisted he deserved obedience, perfected by a woman who had rewritten her own husband's history, taught to a boy who learned fear before he learned empathy." Luther's violence did not begin with Celia, and it didn't end with her either. But its escalation, its transformation into something lethal, had a mentor. Verena Kane didn't just raise a violent man. She cultivated one. There is a moment in every long fight against darkness when you look back and realize the deterioration didn't happen in one catastrophic blow. It happened in increments, small humiliations, minor silences, subtle withdrawals. One bruise hidden beneath makeup, then 2, then a cracked plate, then a trembling voice, then a woman who used to stride into a room, suddenly apologizing for taking up space. For Celia, the breaking didn't begin with fists. It began with fatigue, a heaviness that settled into her bones so quietly that she mistook it for adulthood, for stress, for grief over her father. By the time the bruises appeared, she was already lost inside Luther's world. She told me the first real blow, the first closed-fist punch, landed on an ordinary Tuesday evening. It was so unremarkable a day that she struggled to remember the details around it. Trauma does that, scrambles time until everything feels both hazy and brutally sharp. Celia had come home late from her lab. A new project was launching a cutting-edge biopolymer that could dramatically reduce drug storage costs. She was proud of the work. She wanted to share that pride with her husband. Because despite everything, part of her still believed that if she performed well enough, if she was good enough, if she bent gracefully enough, he would return to the charming man she married. But Luther didn't like her coming home after sunset. He claimed it was unsafe. He claimed she was too trusting, walking to the parking lot with all those men around. He claimed her lateness showed disrespect for the marriage. He was waiting for her when she walked through the door, his jaw tight, his phone in hand, his eyes cold. "Do you know what time it is?" he said. She apologized immediately. Explained the experiment had taken longer. Explained the freezing process malfunctioned. Explained her supervisor needed her. He didn't listen. He never listened. His anger was already primed. "You didn't answer my last 2 texts." "I was in the lab. We're not allowed to have phones." "Convenient," he snapped. "Always so convenient." She tried to step into the kitchen, to put her bag down. He blocked her with his body, and when she gently insisted she was tired and needed space, he hit her, A blunt, direct punch to the jaw. She collapsed onto the tile floor. The Japanese knife, a gift from her father, slipped from her hand, clattering next to her. The blade struck the tile and chipped. A small metallic ping that would echo in her memory far louder than the impact of his fist. She told me later. For a moment, I didn't even feel pain. I felt disbelief, shock, like my body didn't understand what had happened. Verena had been there that night, because of course she was. She stood in the kitchen doorway, as though watching a scene she had seen many times before. She did not flinch. She did not gasp. She did not show concern. She walked calmly to Celia's side, knelt beside her, and did something I still cannot forgive. She placed a hand on Celia's shoulder and whispered, "A wife must learn when to stay quiet." Then she reached into her purse and removed a small makeup palette, as if Celia had simply made a cosmetic mistake, as if the problem was not the violence, but that the evidence needed hiding. She demonstrated how to layer foundation over yellow tones. She told Celia which brands covered swelling best. She spoke about appearances, dignity, preserving Luther's reputation. Men of status are under stress. She said calmly, "Your job is to understand that and adjust." Celia told me she felt her soul leave her body in that moment, the moment she realized that violence wasn't an accident in this family. It was a tradition. After that night, Celia didn't come home to see me for nearly a month. She said she was working late, that she was reorganizing the house, that she was busy with Verena's Harbor Circle charity events. I believed her. Partly because I wanted to. Partly because grief over Samuel had blinded me to everything except my own hollow routines. But there were signs. So many signs. She stopped sending me photos. She stopped laughing on the phone. Her emails became short. Her voice lost inflection, as though she were reciting lines someone else wrote for her. Then the cancellations began. "Mom, I can't make Sunday." Luther's mother planned a gathering. "Mom, can we reschedule lunch? I'm exhausted." "Mom, I'll visit next week. I promise." Next week rarely came. When she did come, her body movements were smaller, her smile strained, the bruises were hidden. But something in her posture, shoulders slightly curved inward, hands always clasped tightly, betrayed truths she couldn't speak yet. I didn't know then that she had stopped sleeping, that Luther kept her awake during disagreements, that he scrutinized every outfit, every conversation, every gesture, that he made her account for her time in 5-minute increments, that he insisted she ask his permission before making plans, that he began confiscating her car keys on days he didn't like her attitude. She told me later, "I thought if I followed the rules, everything would calm down." But the rules changed constantly, unpredictably, cruelly. One day, she'd wear a long dress, and he'd accuse her of trying to look modest to seem superior. The next day, she'd wear jeans, and he'd accuse her of looking too casual for a married woman. Control doesn't need consistency, only obedience. And whenever Celia resisted even slightly, whenever her old spark resurfaced, Verena was there to smother it. "You must not provoke him," she'd say. "You know how sensitive he is. A good wife chooses peace. Your independence makes him insecure. You should work on that." Celia internalized those words the way some people internalize scripture. And slowly, her world shrank to fit the cage they built around her. It wasn't just the emotional erosion or the escalation of violence. There was another threat, one Celia didn't recognize until it was too late: isolation. Luther and Verena systematically dismantled every part of her support system. Her lab friends Luther told her they were jealous. Verena told her they didn't understand the responsibility of marriage. Her mentor at the institute, Luther, accused him of inappropriate closeness. Celia stopped seeking guidance. Her running group, Luther said running after dark was unsafe. Verena said it made her look masculine. Piece by piece, they removed her from every anchor that tethered her to herself. Then, 6 months before the night I watched her fall to the floor under Luther's hand. Celia received her inheritance from Samuel, half his estate. I want you to have this, I told her, placing the envelope in her hands. Your father wanted you to be secure, to have choices. She cried with gratitude, but Luther saw something else. Opportunity, advantage, leverage. And shortly after they purchased that house on Lighthouse Road, bought with her inheritance. Not his. Celia stopped calling me entirely. I wish I could tell you I stormed into that house. I wish I could say I recognized the danger. I wish I had been the warrior my clients believed me to be. But warriors, too, have blind spots. Mine was my love for her, and my belief that she would never hide something that hurt her. The truth is, she hid everything. Not because she didn't trust me, but because she didn't want me to feel the guilt she was drowning in. The guilt of choosing the wrong man. The guilt of failing at marriage. The guilt of becoming the kind of woman she believed I fought so hard to save. Guilt my daughter carried it like a brand on her skin. And every day that passed, it carved deeper, until she could no longer tell where Luther's voice ended and her own fear began. For years I taught my clients that the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship isn't the first blow, it's the silence afterward. The silence where the victim sits alone, replaying everything, convincing herself that maybe she misunderstood, maybe she overreacted, maybe she caused it. Abusers don't need fists to break someone. All they need is doubt. And Celia, my Celia, had been drowning in doubt for nearly 2 years by the time she finally told me the truth. That night, after the police took Luther and Verena away, I refused to let her return to that house. I brought her home. To safety? To her old bedroom, still painted pale blue, still lined with her academic awards, still carrying the faint scent of cedar and childhood. She sat on the bed like a woman waking from a dream, disoriented, frightened, fragile in a way I had never seen her. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I haven't slept here since I was 24. I brought her tea chamomile with honey, the way I made it when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms." Her hands shook so badly she couldn't hold the mug without spilling. "Tell me everything," I said softly. "From the beginning? I need to know when it started." She didn't speak at first. She stared at the steam rising from her cup as if there were answers swirling inside it. I didn't rush her. I knew this kind of telling needed time, needed bravery. She wasn't sure she had left. And then, finally, the dam cracked. "It started earlier than I admitted," she whispered. "Earlier than that first punch, earlier than the jealousy, earlier than the arguments, earlier than his mother." When I asked, she swallowed hard. "On our honeymoon?" I stayed silent, waiting, my heart tightening with every word she struggled to form. "After the dinner with the waiter," she said. "After he accused me of flirting. After he told me I didn't understand how I looked to men." I remembered that part, the coldness in her voice when she recounted it earlier. But now she added something new, something she hadn't told me on that first night. "He didn't just accuse me," she said. "He made me apologize. Over and over. For an hour. Until I cried. He said I'd humiliated him in public, that I disrespected the vows we'd taken that morning. Mom, I apologized so much I lost my voice." She touched her throat as if still feeling the soreness. "And when I finally stopped crying, he held me and told me he forgave me. Forgave me." Her voice cracked, like I was a child who'd misbehaved. That was when I felt it, a molten rage. Not explosive, but cold and precise. The kind of rage that comes when you realize someone has been hurting your child while you were blind. "Why didn't you tell me then?" I asked gently, though I already knew the answer. "Because I didn't want you to think I'd made a mistake," she whispered. "I didn't want you to look at me the way I looked at my clients, the ones who kept going back." "Oh, Celia," I murmured. You were not them. You were not failing. You were surviving. But she didn't hear that, not then. She went on. From that moment, I started keeping things from you. Small things at first, then bigger ones. I told myself it was just newlywed adjustment, that he was stressed, that I needed to try harder. Her voice shook as she exhaled. And then, 8 months ago, everything changed. She told me about the remodeling project, about the designer she'd hired, Sebastian, about Luther's suspicions, his accusations, his paranoia, and then the biggest reveal. That night, after he shoved me, after my head hit the wall, Verena told me something. Celia lifted her eyes to mine. Haunted, hollow, she told me. A wife must learn to keep her husband stable. I never. Stable, I whispered. She blamed me, Celia said, tears pooling, for making him angry, for not adapting. She said all marriages have rough patches and that I would get better at managing Luther's moods. I clenched my fists so tightly I felt my nails cut into my palms. Mom, she continued. She said, a wife should never escalate a situation. That if I hadn't argued about the house being mine too, none of it would have happened. She said that. My voice shook. Celia nodded, tears falling silently. I believed her for a long time. I thought if I just changed, everything would stop. This is what abusers do. They make women confuse endurance with responsibility, pain with loyalty, control with love. I sat beside her, rubbing her back gently. Tell me the rest, I said. She inhaled shakily. I don't even know when the bruises became normal, when the silences became threats, when I stopped calling you because he said I needed to prove my dedication to our marriage. Then her voice dropped to a near whisper. Do you want to know when I realized I wasn't safe anymore? Yes, I whispered. It was the day I met our neighbor, Evangeline Char. I turned sharply. Who? She lives 2 doors down. I barely knew her. But one evening, after I came home with a bruise on my wrist, I told Luther I'd fallen. Evangeline saw me in the driveway. She didn't say anything, just looked at me. Really looked. What did she do? I asked. Heart beating faster. She slipped a note into my mailbox the next morning. Celia stood, crossed the room, opened her purse, and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper worn at the edges. She handed it to me. There were only 5 words. I know, and I'm sorry. A chill rippled through me. Did she ever explain? Celia nodded slowly. She grew up next door to the Kanes. She knew Verena. She knew Damien, too. She told me that when she was a teenager, she used to lie awake at night, listening to the fights through the walls. My breath caught. She said she once heard a scream that didn't sound like anger. It sounded like terror. And then, silence. Silence, the most ominous sound of all. Why didn't she tell you sooner? I asked. She said she didn't want to interfere unless she was sure. Celia replied. She said Verena was dangerous. She shuddered. Mom, I think she was right. She was right. I didn't know it yet. Not fully. Not with the weight of evidence I would later uncover, but my instincts, long dormant from grief, began to wake. I stayed with Celia in that room until dawn. She fell asleep, half sitting, half curled against me like she hadn't done since she was 5. Her breathing was shallow, haunted, uneven. I smoothed her hair and whispered the only truth that mattered. You're safe now. You're not going back. I will burn the world before I let you go back. But even as I said it, brave, defiant, righteous, I didn't yet understand how far the Kanes would go, how deep their power ran, how vast the shadows beneath their legacy were. Because while Celia slept tangled in her childhood blankets, believing the worst was behind her, I stepped into the hallway, leaned against the wall, and closed my eyes. And in that quiet, Still moment. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Fear. Not for myself. For her. Because I knew too well that abusers never let go easily. And families like the Kanes, they didn't let go at all. The days after Celia finally told me, everything felt strangely weightless. As if life were happening inside a vacuum. There were no screams. No slammed doors. No footsteps heavy with rage. No frantic whispers of apology. Only stillness. And silence. And the slow, tentative movements of a woman learning to live outside her cage. Celia stayed in her old bedroom. Often sitting cross-legged on the floor, sorting through boxes she hadn't opened in more than 10 years. Old class projects. Dance recital photos. Letters from her father. Souvenirs from her time abroad. She touched them the way someone touches relics after surviving a war, gently. Reverently. As though they held pieces of the girl she used to be. But recovery isn't linear. Freedom doesn't erase fear. And silence after surviving years of coercive control can feel like an accusation. The first signs of panic came on the third morning. I found Celia in the kitchen. Motionless. Holding her phone with shaking hands. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at the screen. Finally, she whispered, I think he's trying to contact me." My stomach dropped. I took the phone. A single notification blinked across the top. "Unknown number, C, please. Just talk to me." Another, "Baby. I'm sorry. I need you." Another, "It was a mistake. I can fix it." Another, "You left me. You abandoned our home." Another, "You won't survive without me. You know you won't." Another, "Answer the phone, or I'll come myself." A slow wave of ice crawled up my spine. "He's on bail," I said quietly. Celia nodded. "He got out at dawn." Of course he did. The Kane family had power threaded through half the institutions in Fairbridge business. Politics. Law enforcement. They didn't need to buy silence. They owned it. "Did he call?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "These are messages he tried to send when my number was blocked. They came through the email-to-text system. I didn't even know that existed." Most victims don't. Abusers do. I took the phone. Screenshot every message. Saved each one twice. Emailed copies to myself and to a secure drive I'd used for my practice for 15 years. Documentation was our shield now. We keep going. I told her steadily. We follow the process. We strengthen the case. We're not alone in this. But Celia's eyes wide, shimmering, terrified, told another story. "He won't stop." She whispered, "He'll keep pushing." And Verena, "Mom, she's worse. She won't let this go." She was right. And the truth was, I had been waiting for the second strike. Because abusers always follow a pattern. The explosion, the silence, the campaign. And the Kanes, they didn't do campaigns halfway. That afternoon, while I prepared the restraining order renewal, Celia stepped outside to get some air. 5 minutes later, she returned pale as plaster. "There was a car," she whispered, "parked across the street. Engines running, windows tinted. When I stepped outside, the driver lowered the window just an inch, enough to see it was one of Verena's employees." I tensed. Did he say anything? No. He just smiled. Predatory. Knowing. A message without words. He waited until I stepped onto the porch. Then he drove away. I exhaled slowly. "Celia," I said gently, "you're safe here." "Am I?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Because safety wasn't a feeling anymore, it was a strategy. I spent the rest of the afternoon making calls. Former colleagues, a judge I trusted, a journalist I owed a favor, and finally, Officer Denton, the only person on the force who had never been influenced by the Kane family. "I'm raising the patrol on Bracken Street," Denton said. "But Leon, you need to understand something. Word around the department is that the Kanes are pulling every string they can. Luther wants custody of the narrative, and his mother wants you intimidated. I'm not easily intimidated, I replied. He hesitated. No, he said. But your daughter has been through hell. They're counting on her breaking before the case progresses. They're hoping shame does the work for them. I closed my eyes. Shame. The cage inside the cage. After the call ended, I returned to Celia's room. She was sitting by the window, knees drawn to her chest, staring at nothing. I can't go back to work, she said without turning. I can't walk into that laboratory. Everyone knows I'm married to a Kane. They'll know why I left that house. They'll whisper. They'll judge. I'll see it in their eyes. I sat beside her. Let them whisper. I said, let them judge. You owe no one an explanation. The ones who matter will stand by you, and the ones who don't were never worth your time. But she didn't look convinced. Trauma rarely listens to reason. A soft rain began to fall outside. Celia leaned her forehead against the glass, tears mixing with her reflection. Mom, she whispered, I don't know who I am without him. Oh, my heart, that's not true, I said softly. He made you forget. But you were someone long before him. You are someone still. She closed her eyes. I want to believe that. You will, I said, in time. But time wasn't done with us yet. That night, just after midnight, I heard the front gate creak. I froze. The motion lights outside flickered on. Shadows moved across the driveway. Someone was out there. I grabbed my phone and the baseball bat I kept behind the door. Not because I believed violence was the answer, but because I knew what desperation turned men into. Especially men taught their whole lives that consequences weren't meant for them. I opened the curtain just enough to see a tall figure standing at the edge of the yard. Not Luther. Damien. His suit was immaculate. His expression calm. Too calm. He raised a hand, signaling he wanted to speak. Not on my property. Not in the middle of the night. Not after everything. I stepped onto the porch, keeping the bat half hidden. What do you want? I demanded. He didn't flinch. I came to warn you, he said. I stared at him, incredulous. Warn me. He nodded. Luther is spiraling. He's not listening to me. He's not listening to Mother. He's talking to people I'd rather he never knew existed. My blood ran cold. What people, I asked. People who specialize in making problems disappear. My heart slammed against my ribs. And you're telling me this because... His gaze softened by a hair. Because Celia once treated me with kindness, he said quietly. And you remind me of someone my father used to trust. I don't want your daughter hurt. And I don't want my brother doing something he can't come back from. For the first time, I saw something human in him, fear. Real fear. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm saying, he replied. Be careful. Be vigilant. And do not underestimate our mother. Before I could respond, he stepped back, returned to the sleek black car parked under the streetlight, and drove away into the rain. I locked every door and window. I set the alarm. I checked on Celia. She was asleep, curled into a ball, unaware of the danger tightening around us like a noose. I sat awake the rest of the night, because now I knew something terrifying. The Kanes were preparing for war, and we were not just fighting a man. We were fighting a dynasty. I barely slept after Damien's midnight warning. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep. Every passing car sounded like a threat. I kept replaying his words, people who make problems disappear. I'd dealt with powerful families before, but never one so deeply entangled in its own corruption, its own mythology, its own hunger for control. Celia woke late, shuffling into the kitchen, wearing one of my oversized robes. Her hair mussed, her eyes puffy but clearer than the previous days. You didn't sleep, she said, studying my face. I'm fine. I lied. She poured herself tea, hands still trembling slightly. But she held the cup with more intention than I'd seen in weeks. Mom, there's something I need to talk to you about, she said quietly. My heart tightened. What is it? She inhaled. I want to file for divorce. Relief swept through me so quickly, I had to grip the counter to steady myself. But then she continued. And I want to testify. In full. Everything. Every incident. Every detail. I want the world to know what he did. I sat across from her. Celia, that's incredibly brave. And incredibly dangerous. I know, she said. But hiding won't save me. Pretending won't save me. I've been thinking about it all night. I don't want to live the rest of my life afraid. I don't want him to own any part of me anymore. I reached for her hand. You understand what this means. Right, the Kane family will escalate. The smear campaigns will get worse. They'll go after your career, your credibility, your sanity. She nodded. They already have. Mom. But I lived with his violence for years. I know what real destruction looks like. They can't hurt me more than he already has. The strength in her voice startled me in the best possible way. It wasn't the strength of denial, or panic, or desperation. It was the strength of a woman who had walked through fire and was finally ready to stop burning. All right, I said softly. We'll do this together. She squeezed my hand. Thank you. But strength and fragility lived side by side inside her now. And I knew the days ahead would test both. 2 days later, we sat in a small, windowless room at the Fairbridge Justice Center. Officer Denton conducted the formal recording. Celia described everything, every bruise, every insult, every manipulation. Every night she slept with her back against the edge of the bed because Luther didn't like too much warmth. Her voice faltered sometimes, but she didn't stop, not once. By the end, I could see Denton visibly shaken. He switched off the recorder, took a breath, and stood. Ms. Rowan, he said with solemn respect. Thank you. You just made this case unbreakable. But as we gathered our things, Denton's phone buzzed. He glanced down, his expression shifting. What is it? I asked. He cleared his throat. There's been movement on the Kane side. I felt Celia stiffen beside me. What kind of movement? I pressed. Luther's attorney filed a petition this morning. He's accusing Celia of mental instability and claims she fabricated everything due to emotional volatility. End quote. Celia flinched as if slapped. They want a psychological evaluation. Denton continued. And an emergency hearing to challenge the restraining order. Of course. Predictable. Cowardly. Cruel. He was evaluated once. Celia whispered. After he bruised my ribs so badly I couldn't breathe. And they still let him go home. Why isn't anyone evaluating him? Because his family paid for private assessments, I said bitterly. And because the system is built to protect men like him. Denton exhaled. We'll fight it. But prepare yourselves. They're trying to turn the narrative abuser becomes victim. Victim becomes aggressor. A tactic as old as power itself. Celia stared at the table. They're calling me unstable, she murmured. After everything he did to me, they're calling me the liar. I lifted her chin. Look at me. You told the truth today. You broke the cycle. And we are going to make sure that truth stands. No matter how loud they scream their lies. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. That Saturday, something happened that changed everything. Celia and I were walking back from the market, something simple, something normal. Something we were trying to reclaim when a woman approached us from across the street. She was in her 40s, dressed in office attire, holding a leather binder. I recognized the look in her eyes before she said a single word. Are you Celia Rowan? She asked gently. Celia froze. Who's asking? My name is Dr. Hazel Renford, the woman said cautiously. I'm a forensic psychologist. My jaw tightened. Are you working for the Kane family? No, she said quickly. Quite the opposite. I narrowed my eyes. Explain. She swallowed, glancing around nervously. I was hired by Verena Kane 2 years ago, she said quietly, to conduct routine emotional assessments on family employees. But it didn't take long before I realized that wasn't what she wanted. My pulse quickened. She wanted leverage. Hazel continued. Information. Weak points. Stories she could weaponize. And when I expressed ethical concerns, she pressured me. Eventually, I broke the contract. Celia's voice trembled. Why are you here? Hazel reached carefully into her binder and pulled out a flash drive. Because everything I saw, everything I documented, points to a long-term pattern of emotional and psychological abuse, not only from Luther, but from Verena herself. My breath caught. I have records, Hazel said. Transcripts, therapeutic notes, sessions with family members, observations. Enough to demonstrate that Luther exhibits the classic traits of a coercive controller, obsessive jealousy, entitlement, impulsive rage, emotional volatility, and that Verena reinforced those patterns since he was a child. Celia's fingers clutched mine. I'm willing to testify. Hazel reached carefully into her binder and pulled out a flash drive. Because everything I saw, everything I documented, points to a long-term pattern of emotional and psychological abuse, not only from Luther, but from Verena herself. My breath caught. I have records, Hazel said. Transcripts, therapeutic notes, sessions with family members, observations. Enough to demonstrate that Luther exhibits the classic traits of a coercive controller, obsessive jealousy, entitlement, impulsive rage, emotional volatility, and that Verena reinforced those patterns since he was a child. Celia's fingers clutched mine. I'm willing to testify, Hazel whispered, but I want to stay anonymous until the court date. Verena frightens me. I've seen what she does to people who cross her. For a moment, the world tilted. This was the missing piece. The kind of evidence that tore apart dynasties. I stepped forward, voice steady. Why now? Hazel looked at Celia with soft, haunted eyes. Because I've watched too many women lose everything to that family. And because your story, it works like a mirror. I saw myself in you. And I can't live with the guilt of staying silent anymore. Celia covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Hazel nodded once, turned, and slipped into the alleyway as quietly as she'd appeared. When she was gone, Celia collapsed into my arms, sobbing with relief. Mom, she gasped. Does this mean we might actually win? I held her tightly. Yes, I whispered into her hair. For the first time, we have the truth from inside their own house. And that, Celia, that is something the Kanes cannot control. But as the wind rustled the trees around us, I felt it deep in my bones. Victories like this always come at a cost. Because cornered animals become dangerous, and powerful families become vicious when their secrets begin to crack. For a few days after meeting Dr. Dollar, Hazel Renford, it felt as if a small shard of hope had cracked open inside our prison of fear. Celia smiled a little more. She slept without waking from nightmares. She even went for a walk alone just around the block. But it was the first time she'd stepped outside without flinching at every car. But hope makes you visible, and visibility attracts danger. The Kanes were not the kind of family who allowed hope in their targets for long. It began on a Thursday morning. I was in the living room reviewing Hazel's files, meticulously organized PDFs. Timestamps. Recorded assessments when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. This time, I answered. Leon Rowan, I said. There was a pause. And then a voice I'd prayed never to hear again drifted through the speaker smooth. Cold. Sugar poisoned. Good morning? Leon. It's Verena. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice calm. What do you want? Verena. Oh. Darling. No need for hostility. She cooed. We're both civilized women. Mature. Reasonable. You threatened my daughter's life. I said flatly. I don't speak gently to people like that. She laughed softly. An airy, brittle sound that made the air feel contaminated. You always had such a dramatic imagination, she said. But let's set that aside. I'm calling because I heard about Dr. Renford and the little package she gave you. My pulse stopped. How do you know about that? I whispered. Oh. Leon, please. You think people keep secrets from me? I gripped the edge of the table. Hazel is a professional, I said. She wouldn't break confidentiality. Confidentiality, Verena repeated with a slow exhale, as though tasting the word. Do you know how many people tried to hold that over me? Every single one learned the same lesson. I don't need permission to know things. She paused. Then her voice sharpened like the edge of a glass shard. Tell your daughter to return my son to me. This farce has gone on long enough. I nearly laughed at the outrageousness. Return, I echoed. She is not an object. Verena. To me? She hissed. Everyone is an object, just pieces on the chessboard. I decide where they go, including you. I steadied my breath. What exactly are you threatening? Oh. Nothing so crude as threats, she said. I'm simply predicting what will happen if certain files make their way into public forums. Files documenting your, shall we say, occasionally aggressive courtroom tactics. My jaw clenched. She had been digging. She wanted leverage. You have nothing on me. I said, we'll see. She replied, but I do have something on Celia. A chill flooded my chest. What are you talking about? Her medical records? Verena said lightly. You should really ask your daughter about the anxiety medication she took in college, or the panic attacks she had during her senior year, or the counseling she sought after her friend died in that lab accident. I froze. How did you… Oh. She didn't tell you, Verena said sweetly. Does she tell you anything? Leon, really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she has quite a history of instability. Enough to make a fine case that all of this, every accusation, is just another episode. You're disgusting, I breathed. No? Dear, she said. I'm thorough. And then she hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, shaking with fury and something far worse, fear that she wasn't lying about having Celia's records. The Khanas had influence in every institution. Schools, hospitals, clinics, insurance databases. Nothing was sacred to people like Verena. But before I could fully unravel, footsteps sounded behind me. Celia. Her face was pale, her breathing tight. I heard you, she whispered. I heard everything. Celia. She knows, Celia said shakily. She knows about college. She knows about Adrian. She knows about the panic attack. How does she know these things? I went to her, but she stepped back. Celia, look at me. Whatever she has, whatever she thinks she can use against you, it doesn't matter. Nothing you experienced in your past invalidates what Luther did to you. But Celia's eyes filled with tears of shame. You don't understand, she whispered. She's going to twist everything. I can already hear it. Emotionally fragile, mentally unstable, unpredictable, exaggerates, misinterprets events. They'll turn me into the stereotype they use against every abused woman. That's precisely why we fight, I said, but she wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. Do you remember Adrian? She whispered. My throat tightened. Yes. Adrian Hale. Her best friend. A gifted researcher. They were inseparable in their early 20s. And then, the lab accident. The chemical fire. Adrian died in minutes. Celia survived only because she'd stepped outside to take a call. She'd spent months drowning in survivor's guilt. That wasn't your fault. Celia, I said gently. She squeezed her eyes shut. Verena will make it look like instability. Like I fabricated trauma. Like I'm reliving past grief. She won't win, I said firmly. You don't know that. She whispered. I pressed my forehead against hers. You're right, I said softly. I don't know the outcome yet, but I know this: we won't let her break you. Not again. Not ever. But inside, I felt something cold, tightening. Verena had crossed into psychological warfare, and we had to strike back before she escalated. That afternoon, I took Hazel's flash drive to a colleague I trusted implicitly, Julian Kettering, a legal strategist known for dismantling powerful abusers with clean, surgical precision. He was one of the few lawyers the Kanes had never managed to control. When Julian finished reviewing the files, he leaned back in his chair. Oh, he said faintly. This is catastrophic. For them, I asked. For them? He echoed. Leon. Hazel documented years of patterns coaching sessions. Emotional conditioning. Verbal reenactments of incidents Luther wanted to justify. She even noted incidents where Verena encouraged violent responses. He tapped the screen. This, combined with your daughter's testimony, is enough to build a multi-tiered case: domestic violence, coercive control, emotional abuse, and possibly conspiracy to intimidate a witness. And Verena, I asked. He nodded grimly. She could face charges for psychological endangerment, possibly accessory liability in Luther's violence. And if Hazel testifies credibly, we may even reopen older incidents in their family file. A breath escaped me, one I didn't know I'd been holding. But, Julian added, prepare for retaliation. The Kanes won't sit quietly. They'll come for you. Not just legally, but socially and privately. I swallowed. They already have. He nodded. Then we escalate. Quietly. Strategically. And without giving them room to manipulate the narrative. When do we begin? I asked. Now. That night, after I returned home, I found Celia sitting on the back steps, curled under a blanket. The sky was turning from lavender to deep blue. Fireflies flickered among the shrubs. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful, but her eyes told another story. I don't want to be a burden, she said softly as I joined her. You're not. I feel like I'm breaking something inside you, she whispered. You're fighting so hard for me. But this is my mess. My choices. My marriage. My failure to leave sooner. My heart cracked. Celia Rowan, I said, taking her hands. Listen to me carefully. Abuse doesn't make you weak. Staying quiet doesn't make you responsible. Loving someone who deceived you doesn't make you foolish. And fighting back doesn't make you broken, it makes you brave. She blinked hard, tears catching the firefly light. But what if I can't do this? She whispered. You can, I said. And when you can't, I'll do it for you until you can stand again. That's what mothers do. She leaned into me, finally letting her weight rest on my shoulder. And as the night deepened, I held her, my daughter, my heart, my purpose, knowing something with absolute, unwavering clarity. The Kanes thought they were fighting a frightened woman. They thought they were fighting a tired mother. They thought they were fighting alone. But they were wrong. They were fighting a family. They were fighting truth. And they were fighting a force far more resilient than fear. A woman who has already survived the worst and refuses to surrender again. The next week unfolded like the slow tightening of a noose. Every day brought something new, something calculated, something venomous, something unmistakably Kane. The first strike landed on Monday. Celia and I were having breakfast when I opened my email and froze. The subject line read, "Urgent Employment Review Confidential Matter." I clicked. Inside was a formal notice from Faringham Labs, the place Celia had poured her brilliance into for 7 years, announcing that an internal review had been launched regarding her professional conduct. Below that were bullet points dripping with insinuation. Concerns about emotional instability, questions regarding judgment under stress, allegations of inappropriate behavior in high-pressure environments, and at the bottom, anonymous source V. K. Verena Kane. A heat rose inside me, slow, scalding, volcanic. But before I could speak, Celia quietly pushed her plate away. "I knew this was coming," she whispered. "No," I replied. "We're fighting this." She shook her head. "Mom, I loved that job. It was the one place I felt I belonged. Before Luther. Before all this." Her eyes filled but didn't spill. "But now I walk into that lab and all I see are the faces of people who might believe her. Then we show them the truth," I said fiercely. She didn't answer, and that silence terrified me more than her tears ever could. The second strike came Tuesday. A thick envelope arrived from the Kane legal team, slick paper. Embossed seal. Too heavy for a simple letter. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. Inside was a petition claiming that Celia was a danger to herself. Not a danger to Luther. Not a danger to others. A danger to herself. It accused her of being mentally unfit. Suggested she needed psychiatric intervention. And even hinted at emergency guardianship. Guardianship. The Kane family wanted legal authority over her. Celia read the first page and immediately went cold. "No," she said softly. "No. They can't. They can't do that. They won't," I said, stepping in front of her. "I won't let them." "But they're trying," she whispered. "They're actually trying to take my autonomy, my mind, my safety, everything I have left." I gathered her into my arms, feeling her tremble. "They won't succeed. Not as long as I'm breathing." The third strike Wednesday came disguised as kindness. A woman knocked on our door early in the morning. She stood on the porch in a pastel cardigan, holding a casserole dish and a saccharine smile. "Hello," she chirped. "My name is Holly. I'm from the Fairbridge Women's Support Circle. I heard your daughter is having some difficulties." Every word was dipped in false sympathy and poison. "We just want to help," she said sweetly. "When we heard about the breakdown—" "The what?" I snapped. "Oh," she said, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "The breakdown she had at the courthouse last year, and the one after her friend died. The poor thing has always been fragile." My blood turned to fire. "Who sent you?" I demanded. Holly's smile widened with an oily softness. "Mrs. Kane," she said. "She's simply worried for your daughter's well-being. She told me Celia has been unwell, seeing things, imagining threats, and she asked that we check in, just in case." Before I could respond, Celia appeared behind me, pale and shaking. "Leave," she whispered. Holly blinked. "Excuse me." "Leave," Celia said again, voice cracking into steel. "And tell Verena I know what she's doing." I shut the door before the woman could respond. Celia leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "She's trying to make me look delusional," she said. "She's creating a narrative that I'm unstable, that this is all in my head." "She won't win," I said. But Celia was no longer shaking from fear. This time, it was rage. "She will burn before I let her take my mind," she whispered. And for the first time, I saw the woman she was becoming, not the girl who had been broken, but the woman rising from the wreckage. By Thursday night, I knew the Kane family had one goal: make Celia doubt her own reality. Because a woman who doubts herself stops fighting. So I took a risk. One, I had been hesitant to take, one I knew could change everything, one I hoped Celia was ready for. I drove us to a quiet residential street on the east side of town. A modest house. Blue shutters. A maple tree in the yard. Celia frowned. Where are we? Visiting someone, I said. Who? Someone who knows the Kanes more intimately than anyone alive. A shadow passed behind the curtain inside. The front door opened slowly. A woman stepped out, a woman with graying hair, hollow eyes, and the tremor of someone who had spent years trying not to be noticed. Mrs. Gates, I said softly. Her eyes flicked from me to Celia, recognition sparking. You're Luther's wife, she whispered, her voice barely audible. God help you. Celia swallowed. You knew him. She let out a bitter laugh. Knew him, I raised him. My breath hitched. You were, Celia whispered. The nanny. Mrs. Gates nodded. For 12 years. Until I was fired for interfering. Her eyes darkened. I tried to protect him. I tried to protect all of them. But Verena, she doesn't love. She possesses. She stepped aside. Come inside. Before anyone sees. The air inside the house was heavy with old lavender and something older secrets that had never been spoken. Mrs. Gates sat trembling in her chair. He wasn't born a monster, she said quietly. People like to say that about violent men. But it's not true. They're made. Celia's breath trembled. How she whispered. Mrs. Gates's eyes filled with tears. Verena taught him everything: how to control, how to punish, how to demand obedience. She broke him like a wild animal. And when he flinched, she told him, men don't flinch. When he cried, she told him, boys who cry deserve pain. My heart twisted. And you tried to stop it, I asked. I was the only one who ever held him kindly, she whispered. The only one who taught him gentleness. And that made me a threat. Verena pushed me out. Told me I was making him weak. She straightened, voice trembling. But I wrote everything down. Every bruise I saw. Every scream I heard. Every injury explained away as boys being boys. We have detectural. She pulled out a tin box from under her chair and opened it. Inside were pages. Dozens. Yellowed with time. Some with dried tears. This, she whispered, is my testimony. And I'll give it to you. All of it. Celia's lips parted. Why? Mrs. Gates looked at her with aching tenderness. Because you are the first woman he ever loved who didn't fear him completely. And because you are the first woman strong enough to leave. And because, child, if you don't stop the two of them now, no one ever will. My eyes burned. Thank you, I said, voice breaking. Her hand trembled as she gave me the box. Be careful, she whispered. Verena is more dangerous cornered than she is free. When we left the house, Celia cried quietly in the car for several minutes before speaking. I wasn't crazy, she whispered. I wasn't imagining the violence, the manipulation, the tension. It wasn't my fault. No, I said, taking her hand. It never was. She looked at me with new clarity. And we're going to win, she said. Yes, I whispered. We are. Because now we had something the Kanes had never expected. Not just evidence, not just truth, but a witness who had loved their monster before he became one and survived. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Mrs. Gates' testimony was more than a lucky break, it was a seismic shift. A crack in the Kane dynasty's armor that had never existed before. A fault line deep enough to break them open from the inside. But with that hope came a shadow. I felt it the moment I stepped into the hallway and saw Celia sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. Her face pale beneath the glow of the screen. What is it? I asked cautiously. She turned the laptop toward me, and my blood went cold. Across dozens of social media accounts, some local, some from cities we had never visited. Some clearly bought. Celia's face had been posted next to captions like, "Unstable former lab tech destroys innocent man. Jealous wife fabricates abuse claims for revenge. Emotional breakdown history proves she's lying." There were even photos from her college years, pictures she'd posted privately. Pictures she thought were lost, now woven into posts claiming she'd been erratic, dramatic, attention-seeking. And beneath them, hundreds of comments, some mocking, some cruel, some threatening. Celia whispered. "How did they find all of this, these photos, these posts? They were deleted years ago." I shut the laptop gently. "They didn't find them," I said. "They bought them." This was a signature Kane tactic, public humiliation under the guise of public concern. Celia leaned back in her chair, clutching her arms around herself. "It feels like I'm being erased," she whispered. "Like they're rewriting who I am. And I can't stop them." I knelt beside her. "They're afraid of you," I said softly. "That's why they're doing all this. Because for the first time in their lives, you're a threat." Her breath hitched. "I don't want to be a threat. I just want to be free." "You will be," I promised, "and we're closer than ever." But my words felt small compared to the enormity of what she was facing. And then, almost as if summoned by dread, my phone rang. "Officer Denton." I answered immediately. "Leon," he said without preamble. "You and Celia need to come to the station. Now." My heart dropped. "What happened?" "It's about the Kane family. And something new has come to light. Something big." Celia's eyes met mine. "Is it bad?" she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "Let's hope it's the kind of bad that turns into good." The police station felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were bracing for impact. Denton met us at the entrance, his jaw tight, his brows drawn. He led us into a small conference room and locked the door behind us. That alone told me whatever was coming was dangerous. On the table was a sealed evidence bag containing a worn leather journal, old, frayed. The corners softened with time. Denton gestured to it. "This," he said, "was anonymously dropped at the front desk 20 minutes ago." My breath stilled. Celia took a slow step forward. "What is that?" Denton exhaled slowly. "It's Ray Kane's journal." Celia's mouth fell open. I felt my stomach twist. Ray Kane. Luther's father. Verena's husband. The man who accidentally fell down a staircase 25 years ago. My voice came out a whisper. "Is it authentic?" Denton nodded grimly. "Handwriting confirmed by family archives." He slipped on gloves, unsealed the evidence bag, and opened the journal to a bookmarked page. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "Listen to this," he said, and he began to read. Asterisk, asterisk. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. Verena is becoming unpredictable, furious that I've begun locking the liquor cabinet. Furious that I've asked her to attend therapy. Furious that I've questioned her disciplining of Luther. She pushes him to be stronger, harder. She calls him weak when he cries. She tells him men only earn love through obedience. I found him shaking in the hallway tonight, saying she locked him in the dark closet again. I begged her to stop. She smiled at me and said, 'You don't tell me how to raise my son.' I doing. I fear her now. Truly. If I could take Luther away, I would." Celia clapped a hand over her mouth. Denton continued reading. Asterisk, asterisk. Tonight she said something that chilled me. Men forget their place when given too much freedom. She said it while slicing bread. Slowly. Deliberately. With a look I have never seen before. "If something happens to me, please someone make sure she doesn't do to Luther what she has done to me." Celia began to cry quiet, shaking sobs of shock and horror. I felt physically ill. The journal was a confession, a warning, A man's final attempt to save his son at the cost of his own life. When Denton closed it, the room fell silent. Then Celia whispered, "Verena killed him." Denton nodded. "The journal strongly suggests it, combined with Mrs. Gates' testimony and Hazel Renford's records. This is enough for the district attorney to reopen the case formally." I pressed a shaking hand against my chest. "What does this mean for us?" Denton didn't hesitate. "It means the Kanes are more desperate than ever, and they will escalate." He leaned forward. "And it also means they are closer to losing everything than they've ever been." That afternoon, the district attorney called us in. She was sharp, impeccably dressed, and utterly done with the Kane family. The moment we entered her office, she greeted us with, "I've been waiting 15 years to crack this family open. And now, finally, we have more than cracks. We have fractures." She laid out a plan swift, strategic, airtight. File to reopen Ray Kane's death investigation. Issue protective custody requests for Celia, if necessary. Freeze certain Kane family assets pending inquiry. Notify key judges before the Kanes could interfere. Begin a coordinated prosecution strategy. "This is war," she said plainly. "A quiet one for now, but war nonetheless." Celia's hand found mine, but the DA wasn't finished. She turned to Celia. "I need you to be ready," she said, "for witness intimidation, for smear campaigns worse than before, for attempts to paint you as unstable, because Verena Kane is a master manipulator, and she will not go down without attacking every vulnerability you have." Celia swallowed. "What do you need from me?" she asked. The DA smiled softly. "Your truth," she said. "And your courage?" Celia nodded, her chin trembling, but her voice steady. "I have both." We left the courthouse as the afternoon light bled into gold. The air was warm, the breeze gentle. For a moment, the world looked almost peaceful, but I knew peace was an illusion, because as we walked to the car, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A black SUV parked across the street, windows tinted, engine running. It stayed for a moment, then slowly rolled away. Celia saw it too. "She's watching us," she whispered. "Yes," I said quietly, "and she knows her power is slipping." As we stood there, mother and daughter, holding on to each other on a courthouse sidewalk, I felt the shape of the war ahead. But I also felt something else. A shift, a turning tide. Because power built on secrecy collapses when truth begins to breathe. And we had truth on our side now. A grieving child's testimony. A psychologist's records. A nanny's memories. A dead man's journal. Piece by piece, the Kane dynasty was unraveling. And Celia, my daughter, who once trembled beneath her husband's shadow, stood taller than I had ever seen her. "We keep going," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "We keep going until they can't hurt anyone ever again." A week passed, but it didn't feel like a week, it felt like a countdown. Every morning I woke, expecting something to happen. A message, a knock, a headline, a lawsuit, a threat, a shadow behind a window. The air carried an electric heaviness, as if the whole town sensed the ground shifting beneath us. The Kanes were unraveling, and unraveling people are dangerous. Celia did her best to maintain a semblance of normal life. She tried cooking again, though she moved around the kitchen with the caution of someone navigating a minefield. She tried walking in the garden, though she always checked over her shoulder. She began journaling words she wouldn't let me see yet, but she wrote every morning, as though piecing herself back together one sentence at a time. But her nights were harder. Some evenings she tossed and turned. Other nights she woke gasping. Sometimes she slipped into my room, curled beside me like she did when she was a child, and storms shook the windows. "Mom," she whispered during one of those nights, "what if the trial doesn't bring closure? What if I never feel normal again?" I stroked her hair. "Normal doesn't come back. I whispered. It becomes something new, something stronger, something that belongs only to you. She sighed into the darkness. I'm trying. I know, I said. And look at you, you're doing it. Then, almost as if summoned by her vulnerability, the storm hit. Not lightning, not wind, not rain. A different kind of storm. And it came in the form of a letter. It arrived on a Friday afternoon. A plain envelope slipped through the mail slot. No return address. No markings. The kind of envelope people use when they want to be invisible. I opened it cautiously, scanning for anything dangerous. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly typed. No signature, no greeting. Just one sentence. If you don't stop the proceedings, you will bury your daughter. My blood froze. I stared at those 9 words. 9 words that felt like a blade gliding toward the throat of my world. My first instinct was rage, raw, maternal, volcanic. My second was calculation. And my third, fear. I forced myself to breathe. Not panic. Not freeze. Not break. I found Celia in the living room, curled on the sofa, reading a book about trauma recovery. I slid the letter behind my back. But she noticed instantly. Mom, she said slowly. What's wrong? I felt like I was back in a courtroom presenting truth. Hiding nothing. Protecting everything. Celia, I said gently. We need to talk. She put down the book. Her eyes sharpened. What happened? I sat beside her and handed her the letter. Her hand trembled even before she read it. When her eyes reached the final word, she sucked in a breath sharp enough to cut. They're going to kill me, she whispered. No, I said firmly, gripping her shoulders. Listen to me. This is intimidation, nothing more. A threat sent because they're losing control. Her eyes widened, filling with terror. Mom, Verena is capable of anything. You said it yourself. She killed her husband. She broke her sons. If she feels cornered, she is cornered. I said, and cornered people bluff. But what if this isn't a bluff? Celia cried. What if she actually? Her voice cracked, and I felt something inside me break too. I pulled her into my arms and held her as she shook. Celia, I whispered, I will not let anything happen to you. Do you hear me? Not now. Not ever. Not while I'm alive. She clung to me with trembling hands. But the letter, we are not running. I said, we report it. We escalate protection. We document every threat. And we move forward. She shook her head. Mom, I don't want to die. You're not going to Brab, I said fiercely. You're going to live. You're going to thrive. And they're going to face consequences. But the truth was, as I held her, I wasn't certain of anything. And that terrified me. We went straight to the station. Denton met us at the door and took the letter with grim seriousness. I'll have it analyzed, he said. Print type. Pressure. Fibers. Chemical residue. We'll run cameras on your street from the last hour. But what I demanded, he hesitated. Leon, this is an escalation. Whoever sent this isn't just trying to intimidate anymore. They're trying to terrify. Well, I said coldly. It worked. Celia sat pale and silent in the chair, eyes fixed on the floor. Denton knelt in front of her. Celia, he said gently, I know this is horrifying, but please listen to me. Threats like this, the people who send them rely on fear to paralyze you. They want you to crumble. They want you to run. She lifted her eyes to his. What if they actually come for me? She whispered. Denton's voice grew firm. Then they'll have to go through every officer in this department. And through your mother. And through me. And through the DA's office. And through every piece of evidence we've collected. You are not alone. Her breath unhitched just slightly. I reached for her hand. We keep going, I said softly. She nodded. That night, Celia barely spoke during dinner. She picked at her food, her mind trapped in the spiral of those 9 words. I watched her, studied her, ached for her. When I finally spoke, it was with the softness of a mother who knows her child is at the edge of something fragile. Talk to me, I said. She stared at her fork. I don't know how to stop hearing it. Hearing what? Her voice was a whisper. You will bury your daughter. My heart felt like it folded inward. I moved beside her and cupped her cheeks. Celia, I said, look at me. Slowly, reluctantly, she lifted her gaze. You're alive, I said. You're here. You escaped. You're fighting. And right now, they're terrified of you. Not because you're weak, but because you're powerful. Because you told the truth. Because you walked away. She blinked hard. You think I'm powerful. I know you are. And then, her face crumpled not into fear this time, but into something else. Resolve. Strength. A spark that had been buried deep. So we keep going, she whispered. Yes, I said. We keep going. She nodded. Then I'm ready. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in my study with the letter under a lamp. I studied the font, the spacing, the subtle indentations. The paper was high quality, thick, smooth, expensive, not handwritten, not personal, professional. This wasn't a random threat. It was calculated. But something else struck me, something small, something most people would overlook. The phrasing, not Celia will die, not will kill her, not your daughter is in danger, but you will bury your daughter. A warning designed specifically for me, aimed at the one thing they couldn't corrupt, my love for her, and that told me something essential. This wasn't Luther. This wasn't a hired hand. This was Verena. This was personal. And if she thought a threat would slow me down, she had profoundly misjudged the force she was up against. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a storm, a shield, a weapon forged through years of fighting for other women. And now, for the first time in my life, I was fighting for my own. In every long war, there comes a moment when you realize the enemy has made a fatal misstep, not because they are careless, but because they are frightened. And fear, real fear, makes tyrants sloppy. Verena Kane made her mistake 3 days after the anonymous death threat arrived. It came quietly, unexpectedly, in the form of a voicemail. Celia and I were eating lunch when her phone vibrated. The number was blocked. We both froze. She looked at me with wide eyes. Answer it, I whispered. Her hands shook as she tapped the screen. The voice that flowed out was unmistakable. Celia. Verena. Cold. Composed. But beneath that polished ice was something new. Strain. It appears you've forgotten who you are. A pause. A breath. And who you belong to. I felt Celia's fingers dig into my arm. Verena continued. Your mother has always been dramatic. She has filled your head with ideas that do not serve you. You need to stop this nonsense and come home. Immediately. Home. The word tasted like poison. Then Verena's tone darkened. If you do not, the consequences will be severe. Not for you. For those around you. The message ended abruptly. Celia stared at her phone, as if it might bite her. She's escalating, she whispered. Mom, she's threatening everyone. Everyone. I exhaled slowly, controlling the anger boiling in my chest. No, I said. She thinks she's threatening us. But what she's actually doing is giving us exactly what we needed. Celia blinked. What? Proof, I said. Her voice, her threats, her desperation. This voicemail is gold. For the first time that day, Celia's eyes held something bright. Hope. We took the recording to Denton immediately. He played it twice, 3 times, then stood abruptly and called the district attorney. I heard bits of the conversation. Direct intimidation. Yes. It's her voice. No question. Combine with the letter and the journal. Yes. This changes everything. When he hung up, Denton turned to Celia and said in a tone I'd never heard from him before, quiet. Reverend, you just brought down a dynasty. Celia covered her mouth, but he held up a hand. However, he added, it means they'll be reckless, especially Verena. I nodded. Then we prepare. He leaned forward. I'm doubling your patrol, and I'm placing a temporary surveillance unit on your house. Celia stiffened. Surveillance. On us. For your protection, Denton said gently. Not to monitor you, to monitor them. He was right. But the idea of men in unmarked vehicles watching our home made my skin crawl. Still, I accepted. Because safety was no longer a passive state. It was a strategy, a fortress, and perhaps a trap. That night, something shifted inside Celia. She stood in the living room, holding Mrs. Gates' tin box of testimony, Hazel's flash drive, and the printed transcript of her own statement. Her hands weren't shaking. Her shoulders weren't hunched. Her breathing was steady. Mom, she said, I want to take the stand. I blinked. We discussed this. You will testify. No, she interrupted. I don't mean at the hearing. I mean publicly. My heart jolted. Celia. She shook her head. I've been thinking about it for days. Hiding protects nothing. Silence protects nothing. And if I'm silent, who else will they hurt? Who else will they break? She stepped closer, her voice strengthening with every word. I want to give a statement, a public one, on record, with my name and my face. I want the world to know the truth before Verena rewrites my story. I stared at her, my daughter, who once apologized for taking up space now, speaking with the power of someone reclaiming her life. Are you sure? I asked quietly. Yes, she said. Because I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being afraid. And because if I speak first, they can't twist it anymore. I took her hand. Then we do it together. We contacted a local journalist, Maya Torres, who had built an entire body of work exposing institutional corruption. She wasn't afraid of powerful families. She wasn't afraid of lawsuits. And she wasn't afraid of truth. When I told her we were ready to talk, she replied simply, come in tomorrow morning. Bring everything. The next day, Celia and I walked into the Fairbridge Chronicle offices carrying a binder heavy with evidence. And a truth heavier than any binder could hold. Maya greeted us with a firm handshake, sharp eyes, and a leather notebook. Before we begin, she said, you should know the Kanes have attacked my newsroom twice in the past. I don't scare easily, but they're ruthless. We know, Celia whispered. Maya nodded. Then let's get to work. She turned on her recorder. Celia Rowan, she said. Are you ready to tell your story? Celia inhaled. Then she spoke. She spoke of the honeymoon accusations, the jealousy, the monitoring, the first shove, the first bruise, the indoctrination from Verena, the gaslighting, the threats, the isolation, the escalating brutality, the night of the dinner, the applause, the humiliation, the fear, the moment she knew she had to escape or die. Her voice wavered but never broke. It was the bravest thing I had ever seen. By the end, Maya sat back in stunned silence. Celia, she said quietly, this is going to change everything. Celia nodded, hands folded tightly in her lap. This isn't just about me, she whispered. It's about stopping them before they destroy someone else. Maya glanced at the evidence on the table. And with this, she said, I can expose them. Celia's eyes glistened. Then let's do it. That afternoon, the Chronicle published a teaser headline on their website. The Kane dynasty, a survivor speaks. Nothing more. Just the headline. But it was enough to ignite an inferno. Within minutes, the Kane family's PR machine screamed to life statements. Denials. Counterattacks. But they didn't know what evidence we held. They didn't know the journal existed. They didn't know about Hazel. They didn't know about Mrs. Gates. And for the first time they were reacting. Not controlling. Not dictating. Not orchestrating. Reacting. The moment I saw the panic rippling through their spokesperson's statements online, I realized something profound. The Kane dynasty wasn't invincible. It was simply loud. And now it was afraid. That night, I tucked Celia into bed like she was a child again, brushing her hair back, watching her breathe easily for the first time in days. You were extraordinary today, I whispered. She smiled faintly. I feel lighter. You should, I said. You carried a mountain alone for years. She reached for my hand. Mom. Yes. Sweetheart. Thank you for saving my life. Oh. Celia. I murmured, leaning down to kiss her forehead. You saved your own. I'm just walking beside you. She fell asleep within minutes. I left her room quietly. Stepping into the hallway, the house was silent, calm, safe, or so I thought. Because when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw something that made every nerve in my body ignite. A shadow, standing outside, still, watching through the window, tall, rigid, and familiar. Not Luther, not Damien, someone worse. Verena. Her eyes met mine through the glass cold. Empty, gleaming with calculated hatred. She lifted one hand, placed a finger over her lips, and smiled. Not a smile of triumph, a smile of promise, a warning, a vow. Then she turned and disappeared into the night. My breath came in shallow bursts, because the message was clear. The war was no longer in the courtroom. It was at our doorstep. After Verena appeared outside our window that night, sleep became a stranger. I lay awake, listening for every whisper, every creak, every shift of air. I kept the hallway lamp on, something I hadn't done since Celia was a baby. Every few minutes, I checked the security feed, watching the grainy black and white images of our porch, our driveway, our street. Nothing. But nothing was sometimes worse than something, because nothing leaves too much room for imagination, for dread, for danger yet unseen. By morning, Celia could tell I hadn't slept. She sat across from me at the breakfast table, stirring her tea even though she never drank it hot. You saw her, she said softly. I looked up. How did you know? You're too quiet, she whispered. And your eyes. They're scanning everything. I hesitated. I didn't want to burden her. Didn't want to reawaken the fear she'd just started to climb out of. But she deserved the truth. Verena was outside last night, I said carefully, watching us. Celia stiffened, eyes widening with shock and something worse, recognition. She used to do that, she whispered. Even before the wedding, I'd catch her staring at me across the yard. Not smiling, not talking, just assessing, like I was a thing she was preparing to cut open. My stomach nodded. She's escalating. Celia, I said. But escalation is a sign of loss of control. She sighed shakily. It doesn't feel like control is slipping. It feels like she's tightening her grip. I leaned forward and took her hand. She's losing, and she knows it. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. We expected the Chronicle to publish the full exposé within a week. But Maya Torres called us less than 48 hours after the teaser headline went live. Her voice was urgent. Leon. Celia, you both need to come to the Chronicle office. Now. Celia and I exchanged glances. Is something wrong? I asked. I'll explain when you get here. And bring the evidence. Her emphasis on those last words sent a chill through me. We drove across town under an overcast sky. A thick, humid tension hung in the air, the kind that precedes either rain or catastrophe. When we arrived, Maya led us to a back room already filled with people editors, a legal advisor, 2 investigative reporters. Everyone looked tense. Maya gestured for us to sit. The Kanes made their move, she said, flipping a laptop around so we could see the screen. The Kane family had issued a full-page statement on every major local platform. The truth about our family, a campaign of malicious falsehoods. It was long, polished, manipulative, exactly what Verena excelled at. They painted Celia as unstable, me as obsessive, Hazel as disgraced, Mrs. Gates as senile, the Journal as fabricated, the police as biased, the Chronicle as corrupt. And then, the final dagger. We pray for Celia's recovery and hope she receives the psychiatric support she desperately needs. Celia inhaled sharply, as though punched. Maya cursed under her breath. They're not even subtle. But I recognized the tactic immediately. This wasn't a rebuttal. This was groundwork. A preemptive attempt to undermine every witness who might testify against them. This means they're scared, I said quietly. Terrified. Maya agreed. And reckless. Look at this. She tapped her screen. A name appeared in the article cited as a family insider. Evangeline Char. Celia gasped. No. No. She wouldn't. But Maya clicked again, and the screenshot made Celia's face drain of color. A quote from Evangeline clear. Damning. Celia struggled with emotional episodes for years. I often worried for her. The Kanes did everything they could to support her. Celia's hand flew to her mouth. Mom, she whispered, shaking. She betrayed me. I wasn't ready to believe it, not yet. Evangeline wouldn't say this. I said, not willingly. Celia's voice broke. But it's her name, her photo. We ask her ourselves, I said firmly. Today? Maya nodded. Before you go, know this. We're still publishing. But this adds layers to the story. Pressure. Risk. I don't care, Celia whispered, tears streaking down her cheeks. I'm done hiding. Maya squeezed her shoulder. Good. Because the world needs to hear your voice. We drove straight to Evangeline's house. The moment she opened the door, her eyes widened in horror. Oh God, she whispered. You saw it. Celia's voice cracked. How could you? You said you were sorry. You said you knew. And then you let them. I didn't, Evangeline cried. Celia. I swear on my life I said nothing. Nothing. I didn't speak to them. I didn't answer their calls. The quote is fabricated. Then why did they use your photo? I demanded. Evangeline's face crumpled. Because they know I won't fight them. I've spent years hiding from them. They know I'm too frightened to speak publicly. She motioned us inside. Please, let me explain. We entered her small, tidy living room, where every window had heavy curtains. Verena didn't just threaten me last time, she said, voice shaking. She threatened my sister. My nephew. She said she'd ruin us financially if I ever spoke about what I heard growing up. Celia blinked. What did you hear? Evangeline swallowed. Her. Verena. Screaming. Throwing things. Locking Luther in the basement when he disobeyed. And Ray, begging her to stop. Celia pressed a hand to her lips. Trembling. But I was too afraid to be a witness. Too afraid to say anything officially. And she knew it. So she used your silence as consent. I murmured. Evangeline nodded. Tears falling freely. I'm so sorry. Celia. So sorry. If I had been braver, Maybe he wouldn't have married you. Maybe he wouldn't have. No, Celia whispered, stepping forward, taking her hand. This isn't your fault. Verena twisted everything. Evangeline sobbed. They'll destroy me if I speak out now. I took her other hand. Not this time, I said. You won't be alone. But she shook her head violently. I can't. I can't risk it. Please don't ask me. I felt Celia's heartbreak beside me. But I also understood Evangeline's terror. She wasn't weak. She was traumatized. Just like Celia had been. We won't force you, I said gently. But know this, the truth is coming out. Whether or not they twist your name. She nodded, crying silently. As we left, Celia whispered, she's right. Verena crushes anyone who crosses her. She used fear as a weapon. I said, but fear only works when it's one-sided. Celia frowned. What do you mean? I stared ahead, jaw tightening. It's time Verena Kane learned what it feels like to be afraid. That night, after Celia went to bed, I called Maya. Are you still publishing tomorrow? I asked. Yes, she said. Everything. The journal. Hazel's assessments. Mrs. Gates' testimony. Celia's interview. Good, I said, because I want to add one more thing. There was a pause. What? I took a slow breath. A public statement from me. Maya inhaled sharply. Leon, if you step in front of this, you paint a target on your own back. Verena won't just attack Celia, she'll attack you. Your past cases. Your name. Everything. I know, I said, and I don't care. If Verena wants a war, she can have it. Silence. Then, all right, Maya said. Then give me your words, and I'll make sure the world hears them. I hung up. The house creaked softly as I walked down the hall. I opened Celia's door just enough to see her sleeping. Her hand curled under her cheek, her breathing slow and even. A child I once carried, a woman I now stood beside. A survivor rising from ashes she never should have had to walk through. I stepped back quietly and closed her door. Then I whispered into the dark hallway. Verena chose this war, not us, but we will end it. And for the first time, despite the fear, despite the threats, despite the shadow haunting our home, I felt the shape of victory. And it was close. I didn't sleep the night before the Chronicle published the full exposé. I sat in the living room with every lamp on. Hazel's files spread across the table. Mrs. Gates' journal pages organized in careful stacks, and my own written statement beside them, sharp, deliberate, and unflinching. Outside, the wind rattled the branches of the old maple tree. Every sway of its shadow across the window sent a tremor through my nerves. But beneath the fear, there was something else rising. Resolve. By dawn, Celia entered the room, wearing one of my old sweaters. Her hair tied loosely. Her eyes heavy but clear. You're still up, she said quietly. I didn't want to miss today, I replied. She sat beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder. Mom, whatever happens today, thank you. I squeezed her hand. Whatever happens today, Celia, you survived something that should have destroyed you. And now you're building something from the ashes. That's yours, not theirs. She nodded, but her breath shook. I'm scared, she whispered. Good, I said. Only fools walk into war without fear. She let out a faint, trembling laugh. Is this a war? Yes, I said, but it's one they can't win. Before she could respond, my phone buzzed. A message from Maya. It's live. Celia inhaled sharply. Let's read it together, she whispered. The Chronicle homepage was stark and striking. The Kane dynasty, a legacy of control, silence, and violence, A Survivor Breaks Her Silence, by Maya Torres. Below the headline was a photo of Celia, not a flattering one. Not airbrushed. Not staged. A candid shot from our interview, showing her strength, her vulnerability, her truth. Her story unfolded across multiple sections. Her marriage, the manipulation, the isolation, the groomed obedience, the psychological degradation, the physical assaults, the night of the applause, the escape. Then came Hazel's records, page after page of documented coercion, rage patterns, emotional conditioning, and Verena's involvement. Then Mrs. Gates' testimony, every scream, every bruise, every punishment forced on a child who never had a chance to learn gentleness. Then Ray's journal entries, haunting, damning, heartbreaking. Then my own statement. It was the longest part of the article, and the harshest. I didn't hold back. I named every tactic of coercive control. I labeled Luther a danger. I labeled Verena a calculated predator. I demanded an investigation into Ray's death. I demanded charges. And I declared one truth in bold print. My daughter is not the unstable one. My daughter is the evidence. And I will not let the Kane family destroy another life. When Celia finished reading, she placed a shaking hand over her mouth. "Mom," she whispered, "it's all out there. Everything." "Yes," I said, finally. But neither of us were prepared for what came next. By noon, the story had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of shares, thousands of comments. Support pouring in from survivors all over the country. Pressure building on local law enforcement and the DA's office. News outlets requesting interviews. Advocacy groups offering legal support. The Kane family issued 3 statements in the first hour alone, each more desperate than the last. Then, at 12:43 p.m., a press conference. I turned on the television and felt Celia come to my side as the screen filled with the image of the Kane estate, its grand stone columns, its sprawling lawn, its towering windows. And standing behind the podium, Verena, not polished, not poised, not radiant. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked rattled, her hair flawlessly pinned, but her eyes slightly unfocused. She gripped the edges of the podium with white-knuckled tension. She began with the expected lies, fabrications, attacks on our family, unstable young woman, tragedy exploited by the media. But then, unexpectedly, her voice cracked, just slightly, barely noticeable. But I saw it. Celia saw it too. She was losing control, and the world was watching. One journalist stepped forward. "Mrs. Kane, what about the journal recovered from Ray Kane's belongings? Can you confirm or deny its authenticity?" A flicker of panic. She hid it quickly, but not quickly enough. "I will not dignify outrageous forgeries," she snapped. Another reporter pressed. "What about the testimony from Mrs. Gates, who cared for your children for over a decade, and the forensic psychologist who worked with your family?" Verena's tone sharpened into something brittle. Disgruntled individuals seeking attention. But the press was not done. A third reporter stepped forward. "Mrs. Kane, do you deny disciplining your husband and sons with physical punishment?" Witness accounts suggest. Verena slammed her hand down on the podium so hard the microphone squealed. "I did what I had to do." The room froze. And in that silence, Verena realized she'd exposed herself. Her expression faltered. Her eyes widened. She stepped back as though the podium had burned her. The press erupted. Questions. Shouts. Chaos. Verena turned sharply and ran. Not walked. Ran. It was over. Not legally. Not formally, but something fundamental had cracked. A woman who had weaponized poise had finally fractured her own mask. I turned off the TV slowly. Celia stared at the blank screen. "She's falling apart." She whispered. "Yes," I said. The world finally saw the real her. Celia leaned into me, exhaling the longest breath I'd ever heard from her. But the day wasn't done. Not yet. At 4:16 p.m. Denton called. "What is it?" I asked. "You're going to want to sit down," he said. "I'm fine. Tell me." The district attorney just issued warrants. Multiple charges. Coercive control. Witness intimidation. Obstruction of justice. And complicity in domestic assault. My heart thundered. "And Luther?" I asked. An expanded list of charges, including new evidence from Hazel Renford and Mrs. Gates. "He's being taken into custody tonight." Celia covered her mouth, tears spilling over. "And Verena?" I asked. Denton exhaled. "Leon, the DA issued a second warrant." "For what?" "For homicide." The room swayed. "Homicide?" "Yes," Denton said. "For Ray Kane?" My breath caught. 25 years of silence. 25 years of fear. 25 years of power. And now, a reckoning. Celia sobbed quietly, trembling with relief, so violent it looked like pain. "She killed him," she whispered. "She killed her own husband, and she almost destroyed me." "Yes," I said softly, pulling her into my arms. "But she won't hurt anyone ever again." She cried against my shoulder, sobs years in the making. Then she lifted her face, tear-soaked and courageous. "Mom, I'm free." "You are," I whispered, pressing my forehead to hers. "You truly are." That night, after Celia fell asleep in her room peacefully, deeply, without nightmares, I stepped outside onto the porch. The sky was dark and quiet, the street empty, the air crisp.